Record button here. Kind of welcome to today's Texas Coaches to Coaches. I appreciate everyone coming on. Today's speaker is Kelley. She's going to be talking about coaching girls water polo. Kaitlin is the current head coach at St. Agnes Academy. And she also graduated from Cypress Creek High School, back in 2000 and played, or in 2000 and was the state MVP in the 1999 season and played 4 years at Iona and was a 4-year starter in all conference and just was inducted into the Iona Athletic Hall of Fame. So, Kaitlin, welcome so much. And kind of today's topic is coaching girls water polo. I love coaching girls water polo. It's great. It's much better than coaching a bunch of 18 and 16 and under boys that have no idea what's going on. But I mean, this is what Kaitlin does. Her school is exclusively females. So I'm gonna turn it kind of over to Kaitlin, and then we'll go from there. So please, just everybody, if you have some questions, please unmute yourself and ask, or just ask in the chat feature and I'll ask for you. So I'm going to keep admitting people. So Kaitlin, it's all you.
All right, great. Thank you. So just a couple of opening statements about coaching women. Also, I think a lot of the things I'm going to say today are not exclusive to coaching women. And that's kind of the whole point, is that women can play water polo, and we do it pretty well across the board. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind when you're coaching and approaching it from the same mindset with the same expectations as you would coaching a men's team. Women like to compete, so particularly in a sport that they love. So it's important that we give them the same attention that we give to men. Luckily for me, I get to give my girls all of my attention all of the time when I'm in high school and club. There's obviously boys as well. Important that women get the same amount of attention as men from you. And I think you'll get it back from them tenfold if you give it to them. One of the other points I wanted to make is that women's water polo is physical. We all know that. And that's okay. And sometimes that can be a deterrent for new players. They hear that water polo is really physical and dirty. And I think dirty is probably the word I hear more often, and I'd like to deviate from that and say that it's a physical contact sport, and it's totally okay to play that way, physically, not dirty. And I think it's our job to empower them to feel like they can be strong and they can compete, and that's okay too. I think one of the other important things to do is to coach equally from an early age. Now that club water polo is kind of booming a little bit more in Texas, we have more and more kids at a younger age who are playing together co-ed when they're younger. So it's important to start coaching equally at that time, particularly because, when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, before puberty, essentially, there's not that much of a physical difference between girls and boys. When they develop into women and men, obviously there's a little bit more of a strength and speed component that we have to deal with. But if you begin coaching them equally at an early age, it'll just be part of your coaching philosophy, I guess, towards the end. Sorry, I just shook something on my table. But later on, when they're older, particularly like club practices or co-ed practices, one of the things that drives me the craziest is when people separate girls and boys, and it's like girls' cage, boys' cage, or women's cage, men's cage, and it drives me nuts. I think it should be skill-based completely. It should be skill cages, and we should always be challenging our athletes to compete with people that are better than them so that they can learn. And likewise, people that are at a higher level, there's always something that you can learn from somebody else. And that's one of the things I heard from Maggie Steffens recently, was that about her from her coach, quite honestly. And she said, no matter who she's playing against, she does everything to the T. She does every skill perfectly. She works as hard as she can, and that makes her better. It creates better habits, and it makes the people that she's playing against better as well. So not that we're all going to be Maggie Steffens. I wish we would be, but if everybody approaches it from that mindset, then I think you're going to have a heck of a team. So,
So now, again, thank you for being on today. I'm going to hit on something that you said earlier, like kind of just have like, kind of treat the girls the same as you treat the boys. Have you had any experiences with like the girls, like either enjoying that, embracing that aspect, or kind of compare it to, like, I know you don't coach boys that often, but just, yeah, just your thoughts. I just want to just kind of hear a little bit more about that.
yeah, I think from a personal perspective, quite honestly, I learned and was able to improve probably at, on a personal level from practicing with boys. We were at a co-ed school, so I was always able to um, learn from them. And I had one guy in particular in high school and one guy in particular in college that really invested in my kind of career and like helped me along and pushed me. So um, I think it's important that we allow our girls to believe that they can compete with boys all of the time. Maybe not all of the time, right? There's, like I said, skill level to skill level. Um, I also, from our meeting the other night that we had, from a personal perspective, Chris and Oliver had mentioned how hops has changed a little bit and it's more welcoming the Masters Women's program here. And I was telling Joe earlier that my experience when I was younger, right out of college and probably in my referee rather than play. So I backed off and I stopped going. And I think that's changed now. So that's really important as well.
Well, I'm just admitting some people as we go, so we're getting more and more people coming. Um, Now, like you mentioned, like you like to mix the girls and the boys together, and I'm a proponent for that as well, especially that'll push the better girls. But whenever you get the new girls or the less experienced, and this is their first kind of practice, how do you get them kind of used to the physicality of the sport and possibly playing with boys and
Yeah.
such too?
So
So
yeah, like I said, it's always not always, but it can be a deterrent for some girls that there's like a physical component involved. So I think it's important that we're creating a safe space for them. Number one, that they feel like they can communicate openly if they're uncomfortable about something. Um, and then matching skill level to skill level is really boys practice or goal or cage if they're a goalie or whatever it is. It's making sure that they understand that the people that they're competing against or practicing with are of their similar skill level, so that and that's really just our job as a coach is to create that safe space for them.
so now you've mentioned the skill level, but yeah, between boys and girls. So do you see kind of some major differences between skill level boys, girls?
Yeah, I think as they get older, as we start to hit puberty and the boys get stronger and get faster, things that to focus on from a female perspective, and I talk about this a lot with my colleagues, my around I have a little group of female coach friends that I chat with often about this kind of thing. We focus a lot on skill, right? Fundamental skill development and making sure that you're doing everything really, really well. Because girls don't generally have the advantage of just being able to muscle through something, right? We're not just throwing the ball as hard as we can at a cage or skipping the ball as hard because we can and it's skipping 12 feet over the cage or whatever. And I think that sometimes happens in men's water polo a little bit. Girls don't have that always like the muscle to kind of get through. So we really emphasize skill set. And I think that also will carry them through post high school and in their like higher level careers, because you know just because somebody is stronger than you doesn't mean that they're better than you. So if you have the skills and are playing smart, not hard necessarily, you can improve and play at a really high level. So I've seen some very, very small female water polo players that are wildly, wildly good.
Yeah, kind of
So
just go watch Commerce, right? So, um,
yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah.
again, coaches, if you have some questions and such, please feel free to ask or just kind of unmute yourself and just go ahead and feel free to comment kind of here or there. Ian, I think you have a question.
Yeah, Kaitlin, so I love pairing like genders together, right? And pushing the girls and pushing the boys. And I think there's a certain age that, for me at least, I unfortunately think that we have to stop mixing them for long periods of time, right? Just, or playing against each other just based off the physicality of the game and different things like that, where like you get put in some uncomfortable situations, I think, that aren't really okay anymore today, ever, but really anymore today. But talk to me about how you, like some strategies you have for the lower level athletes. Like the point is, when I pair my top girls with my best boys, great. They all work super hard. It gets really intense and they do really good work. But when I get to that mid level or even that lowest level, I tend to have like really divergent groups because the skill levels are the same, but the focus or the outcomes that they are wanting in those are very different. And so talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you do with those divergent groups.
You mean like the outcome that the kids want from their playing?
Yeah,
Or
like
the
in general,
coaches,
I feel
the
like when
kids?
I talk about that middle or lower level, the boys want to just mess around, right? And throw sick helicopter backhands and things like that. And the girls want to get better, but they're just not skilled enough to actually go ahead and do the things that the top level group is doing or the focus that they're having.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with the same thing. And I think a lot of that comes from our ability to define our expectations of our practices and our time that we're spending on. And I tell my kids a lot that, if a coach isn't like on you, if they're not telling you things, if they're not giving you feedback, it's because they don't think that you can do any better, right? They've kind of given up on you. And I try to, like, for instance, like, it takes me to the summertime when I'm seeing like younger boys, like 14-year boys that have just learned to play and are just getting strong and are constantly skipping the ball. And it's like, drives me crazy. I mean, we've added consequences to some of those things. Like some of the time we'll have them, okay, if I see another skip shot, like you're doing, burpees to the tune of like same or whatever it is, and focused as possible is super important. And then really managing
Hey, Kaitlin. Hey, Kaitlin.
my expectations of them by defining my expectations
Hey,
are
Kaitlin. This
of
is
them, and if they
this is
can't
Joe.
handle
Yeah. Is anybody else having issues kind of hearing Kaitlin? Okay. Kaitlin, you're kind of freezing up a little bit and coming
okay,
kind of in and out. So I don't know if you want to just kind of
sorry.
log off and log back in, or if you want to go to a different place. It's up to you. But I mean, I kind of do agree with what kind of Ian said. There are different little challenges for coaching like the younger kids as well as the older kids, and kind of like the point that Kaitlin said. I mean, it is just kind of just that repetition and kind of focusing on those skill sets at the younger levels. And the girls aren't going to sit there and want to skip, but it's going to be one of those things where you can treat them the same, but there are going to be some different skill sets, especially at like as they get older and such. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Ian?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I like to, I actually like it because over a short amount of time, the girls usually end up being better than the boys in those groupings. And then I just end up with these problems where, because they're paying attention, right, and doing a great job in general, like, so the girls are generally exceeding that boys middle group. And then I end up with too many groups. And I personally always end up with a group of just mess around boys at the end, because that just kind of get kicked out of practice because we end up with the girls groups advance and improve, and I don't want to hold them back. And some of the boys groups don't. And so, I make
the boys group don't because they're thinking about the girls during the practice, right? So
sure.
exactly. So but the girls are kind of focused at the task at hand. So,
but I think it's a tough thing, and we talk about having a lot of programs together or
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can.
Sorry about that. Oh, now it's telling me it's unstable again. I'm sorry. Of course, hasn't happened the entire break, but now it's happening.
That's okay. I can hear you much better though now. So
great.
So now, I mean, you got kind of cut off a little bit, whenever kind of we were discussing at the younger ages, anything different that you do for boys, girls, etc. So
Yeah, and I think I mean I could still hear for the most part, and I experience the same things. And I agree, there is a point where it gets to a level of maybe discomfort, or maybe you don't want to mix the boys and the girls together because of just covering yourself and not putting yourself in situations where there could be a situation. But again, like I've been fortunate to have good coaches and people that have stepped up when things like that have happened, in my life. So, and I think it's about us shutting it down to.
yeah, you're kind of breaking up again, Kaitlin. So I don't know if you have to go to a different part to get a stronger signal, but does anybody have any other comments as far as the coaching the girls at the younger age groups out there?
So.
Yeah, Joe, it's Rob Pegler. I do have some. So here in St. Louis, we
Sorry.
a few months ago an all-girls club on purpose to help grow the girls' game. And what we found was that there was a huge kind of unmet need, at least here, maybe not in other parts of the country, but for girls-only competition. Now, we've had girls playing co-ed for many years, but few in number, right? And the girls that did play co-ed held their own. That was great. But it was difficult to really grow the sport like it should be grown by just saying, hey, you can come in and play with the boys. That's great. If you can hold your own, great, more power to you. And, truth be told, if we look, take a hard look and look at other sports, very few other sports develop like that. They start segregating 11, 12 years old. And I think, my opinion only, others have different opinions, but we should start doing the same, much more so than we do now. And I run from anywhere from 12 to 18. And we find that a lot more girls, number one, come out and participate, want to learn it if they're in an all girls environment. It's much more comfortable for them. And I have 2 daughters too. So you fathers that have daughters, you get this. And they're perfectly comfortable being physical and everything else in the sport with all girls. But when you get them into boys, and now again, there are exceptions that can hold their own and don't care, and the boys don't care either, but those are few and far between. So if we really want the sport to grow, we really have to emphasize girls. So discussing coaching of girls in particular, never mind the skills, because I agree with Kaitlin, the girls can do the skills just as well, or in lots of cases better than the guys, because they're literally applying more brain power to it,
Yes, they are. Yes,
in a
they
lot
are.
of cases, and not just trying to gut it out and, brute force their way around an opponent. So
You're totally right. And I'm at a mega advantage by having an all girls school, right? Because we always practice all girls all the time during the high school season, and often, not. And I am constantly telling them, like, I'll get in and play with them, or when they're like playing against each other, and they're like so much harder on each other than they ever are in a different situation. They go harder. They're
Right.
more comfortable with one another. So that's definitely about like setting your team tone, I guess. But yeah, definitely having a space for them to play together is super important. But at the higher level, I think it is important to give the girls who need the push, right, the opportunity to participate at a higher level. So I think it's really about skill assessment.
and I can see that. And again, in comparison to other sports still, I don't see that happening, at least in structured high school settings right now, maybe in club. But again, as they get, 16, 17, 18, and they get to be elite, I think we're selling ourselves short if we don't think we can train all girls and get them to that really high level.
Oh, we can.
Playing girls.
Yeah.
So
No,
they
I
don't
think
have
we
to
can
go in
for
and play
sure.
with the boys just to get there.
No, that's true. And that has changed dramatically since 20 years ago,
Yeah, and I mean,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
we have come a long way, but there's still a large room to grow, especially on the women's side. And just the sport in general, but definitely on the women's side for sure. Now we have a kind of a question from the chat from Chris Cullen, who is asking kind of what type of strategies kind of do you use to build confidence, especially on offense shooting. And I know you and I talked a little bit about kind of what you do with that new player that may not have thrown the baseball with their dad in the backyard.
So especially with newer players, and I get all of my girls essentially as freshmen. I don't have them before, and I don't know who's coming to my school or my program. So sometimes I get girls that have never played a sport that they throw anything. So that's like, we're having to go back from step one. And a lot of that happens outside of the water. We do a lot of, I implore them to go home and play catch with whoever they can, and send them like mechanics videos and like watching baseball and throwing and things like that. So we work a lot on the mechanics of shooting. As far as like strength of shooting, we do a lot of band work and like body resistance training. So we don't do a ton of like weightlifting, but that's just because we don't have really a weight room and not a lot of time for that. So but just small things. I have them all on like band programs that make them stronger, and working on like prehab stuff with their backs and shoulders and things like that. So, and then we do a lot of like repetition, right? So like our drills are always like, I try to keep like low player to ball ratios. So they're not like sitting in line and floating on a ball and waiting. It's like we're constantly moving, and the more opportunities they have to shoot, the better they get at it. So,
so are there any specific like kind of drills that you might start a brand new kid off the first day that they step foot, and then kind of maybe progress from dry land and a tennis ball to in the water and kind of shooting on a live goalie? If
they're like brand new, starting from like, let's say they've never thrown a ball before, definitely working on mechanics on land, and then we're working at a shallow end, so they're not treading water while they're trying to attach this new skill, because that becomes a whole other beast. And then once they can tread water, or at least enough to hold their shoulders or their chins out of the water, then maybe we'll pull them out of the shallow end and then add like close range shooting without a goalie, probably just like get it to the goal. And then we might add a goalie and just basic shooting drills like pick up and shoot, but focusing on mechanics, because that's when you get them in the beginning, right? You can break all of their bad, or like keep them from developing any bad habits to begin with.
Yeah. So we have a question in the chat. It's do you do a lot of shoulder work with your girls? And if so, can you talk about specifically what you do? I know you just mentioned bands. I mean, is there any other specific stuff?
Yeah, so we're also really fortunate that we have like an on-campus athletic trainer, and she actually worked with the Rice swim team before she came to us. So she's really well-versed in swimmer shoulder injuries and things like that. So she generally will meet with my team before every season, and we go over like prehab stuff. So bands every day. Now, while I'm telling them to do bands every day, they don't necessarily do it. And sometimes I feel like once we get to the high school season, we like try to use all the time that we can in practice. So like in the pool. So some of them do it and some of them don't, but that's an accountability thing that we talk about outside of the pool. So they do a lot of like internal rotation, external rotation, I's, T's, Y's, things like that. Really just basic strengthening things that are going to prevent further injury or prevent future injury, but they also work together to, make them stronger. So.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And you also mentioned kind of earlier, you get a lot of your athletes, and the majority of your athletes are new to the sport as freshmen. So that's always kind of a big kind of challenge to high school coaches out there as far as the recruiting of new players. So how do you go about doing it, and how do you go about kind of getting them into the pool and staying at the pool?
So I've had really great success with picking up kids that have been cut from other sports. So volleyball is a really good one to pick up from, because there's a lot of like throwing motion in volleyball with they translate pretty well. Soccer and basketball, I also pick up a lot of cuts. So any kid that gets cut from a different sport and is like licking their wounds, and we're getting, emails about it. And I'm like, come play water polo. Now you have a home. And that I think that's how we that's how I got him into the program initially, and I still do. But it really created this culture of like, there is a place for you. Like you have a place on our team and a home kind of. And so that's been really enticing for my new players. I also do my best recruiting, which I know everybody thinks private schools recruit, and we don't, or at least St. Agnes does not. But I do my recruiting in PE. So like we play dodgeball early on in the year. And if a girl can throw a dodgeball, I pull her to the side. I'm like, hey, like, have you ever thought of water polo? And she's like, I can't swim. I'm like, that's why we have a swim coach. Like, come to the pool. And truly, like, I just pluck them out of obscurity kind of, and give them a sport that they never thought that they could be good at, you know. And it's been very successful for me. So
yeah, you guys good, and that can work, and not just for girls but for boys out there too, just just kind of across the genders and such. Now, you mentioned kind of the culture of St. Agnes, and one of the great things I saw back in April was all the videos that your girls were putting together, and just like just passing back and forth. Do you want to talk about the culture of St. Agnes and kind of how you've built it there over the last 10 years? Because I think it's just kind of one of the strongest cultures out there.
Yeah. So it definitely took.
All right, Kaitlin, you're cutting out again. So you're cutting out again.
Can y'all hear me?
No, yes, you're good. Here. Yeah, you're good again. So.
Oh, dang. Am I back? Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
You're back.
Sorry. Okay. So culture-wise, it took some time when I came in. This is my 10th year at St. Agnes. So, you know, it definitely, it took time for people to buy into the program, and it took time for them to buy into my philosophies, but we spend a lot of time together. We play a lot together. We were very insular in the beginning. Like, we played as much as we could together, really building the team rapport, building this like so-called family that people want to be a part of. So now it's trickled down into kids know about it when they come in. You know, they want to come and try water polo because their big sister did it, or because their neighbor did it, or whatever. So I think we've been fairly successful with that. We do a lot of like team building and community building things, which has proved really, there's a lot of studies that say women respond to that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people can be really put off by that because they think it's like sitting around in circles and hands and telling each other how much we love each other. And that's just really not what it is. And for me, it's more about understanding and helping our girls to understand who they are at their core, each other. I'm very into like personality assessments and communication skills. And there's a thing called the DISC profile that I did with my girls a few years back. And it really establishes like how you like to be communicated to, like how do you take feedback best? And if I have a problem with somebody on my team, I know that that person likes direct communication. So I'm going to tell them exactly what I'm thinking, or maybe the person needs a little bit more softer side. So you have to come at them with maybe a gentler tone of voice, but they all know how to do it too. Right. So I invest in that kind of stuff. I think it's important, and I think they feed off of it too. So my girls end up developing that skill set, which I think is what it is really ultimately.
Yeah. Well, good. And I mean, and one thing that might be a little, it's not really overlooked, but you know, it is part, and it's really kind of specific to women's water polo, is suit grabbing. I mean, any of your thoughts as far as kind of teaching your athletes, to avoid it, to get out of it, or kind of thoughts on the type of suits and such like that that coaches kind of should be kind of getting their teams and such?
Yes. So unfortunately, that is a part of women's water polo. And as much as you want to pretend like it's not, or as much as we want to coach our girls that not to do it, it happens. And I know some girls on my team are guilty of it because it's the easy way sometimes to get things done, but it's not the appropriate way. So in order to avoid it, I always tell my girls, like, if your suit's being grabbed on defense, like, you're in the wrong position, number one. So that's your fault. And then if you can't get out of it, or if you're being held, that should be your indicator that you should be moving, right? That's your like green light to go somewhere. So like somebody's holding you and grabbing your suit, then get them off of you, like roll out of it, swim off of it, whichever. So those are the two directives we would give. Like if you got caught, if you're, particularly the bottom of your suit is being held, then your hips were not where they were supposed to be. But secondly, if you're being held like up top, then that's your green light to go.
So, kind of what about any thoughts for the male coaches kind of out there that, yeah, that have to kind of order female suits? Is there some thoughts on that?
Suits. I have never worn a comfortable water polo suit in my life. Like, we've gone through a lot. So, ordering suits, let's see. I've gone through a bunch of different companies. Even in the last year, like we ordered for my friend and they were so small that I had to do a reorder, and we did the fit kit and everything. So I think fit kits are really important. I think making sure that you're seeing them when they try them on is really important. My girls love to order like 8 sizes too big. They cannot fathom that they can fit into a smaller size. So that's also really important. Having the older girls kind of guide them through that process is an easy way to take a step back if you're a man and you don't feel comfortable assessing the size of a woman's suit. Having your older girls help guide them through is a really easy way. But yeah, I think trying different ones. We found a really good one this year that it's called extra coverage. It's not really, it just has normal coverage, quite honestly, but we were pretty happy with it. So, or at least for the few weeks that we got to play in it.
Yeah, Kaitlin, I find that's true. We have our older girls, kind of mentor the younger ones about suit fitting, and we always get a fit kit. That's a must.
Yeah. Some of the fit kits can be stretched out, so I caution people, or at least my girls, to be careful. Like, you think you're a small or 28 or whatever it is, or order, and if you're ordering the extra small and then it comes to be like this big.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kaitlin, I have a question about goalies in particular with girls. We find that, especially 12 and under, 14 and under, they're kind of borderline, but they're not physically strong enough to play the same game as an 18-year-old guy would throw, especially goalie throws. They're throwing half pool or more, sometimes almost all the way down the course. Your 13-year-old girl probably can't throw that far. How do you adjust your practices and working with your goalies to A, try to develop the long pass, but B, given that maybe they can only not even halfway down the course, how do you adjust to fit the athletes that you have?
Yeah, so if we're lucky enough to have a goalie that can throw, which I've had one because she was a softball player. The rest of them were like kind of off the streets, that we grabbed. And so really it's that throwing development. So we emphasize strength training or band work, and then spending time every single day working on long passes. But for instance, like this year, or with our like JV goalies or newer goalies, the messaging is less about forcing the goalie to make the long pass and telling our offense that it's their responsibility to help the ball, right? Like, and that's a challenge for me, apparently, because my kids don't do it. So apparently I'm messaging it wrong. I need to work on that, I guess. But it's more about helping them and looking for the ball. Because otherwise they just throw it, right into traffic 5 feet in front of them. So it's not, it's not good, but really it's about the messaging. And once we do have, like, for instance, our goalie this year, once we have a pretty, like, a trickle down kind of goalie system where like the older ones are kind of taking the younger ones under their wings and helping them. So I've been lucky that they've been good at passing along that information, and they work together pretty much until we break off into, like scrimmage time or stuff like that. So
how did Abigail like being on that, being kind of like, on the session with Greg Mescal a couple weeks ago?
She liked it. She was a little nervous because we rib her a little bit because she hasn't historically been great at live interviews, but she enjoyed it, so she had fun.
All right, so a couple last little things here. Any thoughts on just like the men coaching the women, just kind of keeping them accountable? I think you talked about a little story where a coach kind of came up to you, hey, Kaitlin, can you tell my kids to get the suit out of their butts a little bit or something like that?
Yeah.
So any thoughts as far as that dynamic is concerned?
Yeah, I think I mean, I think it's always okay to like hold your kids accountable for how they're behaving and what they look like in term, not what they look like. I don't want to sound like I'm, preachy, but like, I think it's an important boundary to establish early on that like, this is how a suit is made and this is how we wear it. And there is the campaign called Fix Your Suit if you're ever feeling uncomfortable about how to approach that. And it's just, that's essentially what it is. It's fix your suit. And that's all you have to say. I say it often, and I say it to other people's kids often too, whether or not they listen to me. So in terms of men coaching women, I think it's great. Like I have, I coach with men. So, but I do think it's really important to, if you can, have a woman coaching on your staff, right? So it doesn't have to be exclusively female, but I do think it's important to have a diverse coaching staff, and that goes for like across the board diverse, right? So but kids want their teachers and their leaders to look like them. So, I think it's important to have women on the coaching staff when you're coaching women.
Yeah, well, good. And talking about that, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about WOPAC?
Yeah, so the WOPAC is an organization that was started by Susan Ortwine, and I got involved randomly a while back because they did a satellite clinic in Chicago, and my friend lived there. So I just went, and then I was like, had no idea that it existed. And then I've been back ever since. So I think I've been going for like 6 or 7 years or something. And it's just an organization. It's the Women of Water Polo and Coaching. And we have a conference every year. It's in California, usually either in San Diego or at Stanford. And it has been a really invaluable experience for me. It's not supposed to be, it's exclusive to women. Obviously, it's the Women of Water Polo and Coaching, but it's not like an anti-male organization. It's more about how do we get more females involved in coaching and playing water polo? And that's really at the basis of it is what it is. But the conferences are really cool because they have such a range of coaches. So we have people that have never coached water polo before up to, the associate coach at Stanford, right? So like it is, and she always says, and this is the thing I love, she's like, my problems are your problems. If you're having a problem, then I'm having it too. It's just on a different level. So I think that's been a really valuable piece of advice that she's given me, because I look at other people and how they coach all the time. I love watching other people coach. I think it's the best way to get better at coaching. So that's why I think these things are also really important. It's really fun to hear everybody else's issues because they tend to always be the same, right? So it's been a really important organization for me to be a part of. So if you have females in your programs or you're looking to try to get females coaching into your programs, have them shoot me an email and I'd be happy to send them the information. This year it's going to be, I think, virtual. I don't think we're getting together, or it's been canceled. So unfortunately. But
when is that normally?
So usually it used to be, well, now it's early August, generally speaking. So it usually falls on like the first weekend that we are back in school, but I'm lucky enough to get to take a day off and go. So.
Well, good. Well, I mean, that's incredible. That's, again, the Women of Water Polo and Coaching. It's also called WOPAC. So, yeah. I mean, I think coaching women is awesome.
I agree.
Is there any last thoughts to everybody? Questions for Kaitlin? Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question, and forgive me if you covered this already. I've been kind of trying to do too many things at once. But one of the things that I always feel like I have to deal with, and it's along the lines of teaching them how to throw, right, is that just like, I'm sorry to be direct and maybe politically incorrect. But in general, I feel like girls that grow up playing sports or just that are joining our sport of water polo aren't very offensively oriented or aggressive to begin. And so I think it's important to teach them aggression and contact and things like that. But one of the ones that I think always gets thrown around when we talk about female sports in general is scoring, right? And scoring aggression and shooting and not having enough emphasis on those things to create girls that like to score, right? Or like to take the shot and things like that. It usually ends up being one girl on your team, versus the whole team, I feel like. And so what are some things maybe that you've done to help your teams understand that from a very early time in their development of being aggressive to score and that shooting's okay and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we tell our girls, and I probably didn't word it this way until I read the book, but I read the book, The Wolf Pack, and one of the rules in it was demand the ball, right? So I could read that book 100 times. I love it. There's a lot of really good stuff about women's sports in there, and it's about soccer, but obviously it translates. So demanding the ball is really important. Like we tell them, like, you have to insert yourself into the offense. You cannot be a peripheral player. And if you are, then you're going to find yourself on the bench, right? That's where you're going to spend the time. If you want to watch, we have a seat for you. So I think telling them to demand the ball, empowering them to believe that they are capable of being a scorer. Like, I think that goes with the strong thing too, right? You don't have to be the biggest, strongest person on the team to be the most impactful. And I think that's super true in women's water polo. So finding what their strengths are on an individual basis and then honing those strengths. So maybe you're really good at turning somebody from the 1, maybe you're really good at turning somebody from the 5, or maybe you have a really quick off the water shot, whatever it is, and finding what their individual strengths are, and then reminding them that those are their strengths, or telling them that those are their strengths, and just pounding it into their heads, quite honestly, and telling them to demand the ball and insert themselves into the offense. So
what about in terms of like the development portion of that, right? So like, I think a lot of times I see, especially with girls, right, where like someone will step up and finally take that shot. They're open. Okay, we all know they're open for a reason, right? But like, they're open and they take the shot, and you want them so badly to take that shot, but then you look at their coach and their coach is screaming at that girl for taking the shot, right? And so how about for you, what does that cycle look like where, you're taking someone from stepping out of their comfort zone to finally being comfortable with them, and what are some things you do to make yourself more patient?
Oh, make myself more. Well, so most of them, we tell them also like green light, red light. So everybody starts off the season with like a green light. You have the green light to shoot. If you have the ball and you're facing the cage and you have an opportunity, like, take it. There's no mistakes to be made, especially at the early level. Like, and if they do make a mistake, oh well, like, we can't be screaming our heads off at the younger kids. I think that's part of it too, is the feedback that we give them after a mistake happens is like, okay, move on. It happened. Like, next time up. Right. Now when they get to the hot, like, once they start to develop, some of them develop overconfidence. So they get the red light for shooting. So I have to, I will tell them, you're on red light, you're on red light duty. So, but then I'll use those girls in comparison. See how many times Katie shoots the ball when she shouldn't. That's how many times you should be shooting the ball, or, so I don't say that in front of their faces with names and things like that. It's not that demeaning, but, in a polite and helpful way. And just acknowledging when you see them. I also read a book one time called The Power, or The Myth of, what is it called? Like The Myth of Motivation or something. And it was more about acknowledging when people do things right, rather than telling them, yay, good job. It's like, I saw that you took a shot that time. That's exactly what I want you to do next time. Take another shot. Just do it 2 seconds faster. And so, like, putting the language to what they're doing in order to have the repeat behavior. So, yeah.
It's timely today, but I put in the chat too. There was an article with Anson Dorrance today on creating more competition in how we're raising our women or our young girls. So I threw
awesome.
that in.
Yeah. Was that the Guardian link that you put in? Okay, good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Kaitlin, we do this with it's like you said, the younger age groups for sure, the 12s and the 14s. And we tell them, hey, as a team, I'd much rather you take a shot. Maybe you miss, maybe it gets stopped. I don't care, but you count up all the possessions in a game. We want as many of those to end with a shot, right? Score or no score, than otherwise, right? So now these girls get the idea, oh, this is what's supposed to happen at the end of a possession. We're supposed to take a shot. And, again, in training, we don't care if it's good shot, bad shot, gets blocked, doesn't matter. But they get that into their head that, oh, this is what we're supposed to do at the end of a possession, is shoot the ball. So we tell them, like you said, you got to look at the cage. You don't have a defender, within 2 meters. Shoot the darn ball. And they get it. Pretty quickly they get it.
Yeah, shoot and get back on defense. We also take stats, so not as specifically at the younger age, but sometimes if you're trying to increase, you know, how many shots you're taking. Like we tell them at the end of the game, we only took 13 shots that game. Like, can't win a game, you know, if you're only going to take, or sometimes it's as low, sometimes it's really low, which is embarrassing, but, you know, can't win a game if you're only going to shoot the ball 5 times. So especially you know, at the lower level. So, yeah, we'd like to give them like tangible things that they can take home with them.
And then there's the athletes sometimes, because I think the girls, again, they're much smarter. They use their heads more. The boys can just kind of turn it off and just play sometimes. The girls sometimes will overthink it kind of a little bit, and not just the shooting aspect, but is there, especially once they get to a certain level, then they're in the 18, they're like the junior seniors in high school. Is there ways to just kind of pull them aside, kind of talk to them before or kind of after practice to get those kids that just are the overthinkers?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's like I think a primary problem that we have. So it's like they're overthinking everything. It's like, trust yourself, trust your instinct, trust your gut. So talking them down, but yeah, I think pulling them aside is one thing, and developing that rapport with a kid that you can be totally honest and totally transparent with them, and like lean into the hard conversations with them is a really good way to, you know, bolster their confidence in themselves and to stop overthinking. So, you know, if it's really severe, you could send them to a sports psychologist, but we haven't had to do that very, very often. We've had a couple of kids that are like, you know, there's some maybe external things happening at home and things like that. So, but allowing them safe spaces to mess up, I think, is really important, you know, and being able to be resilient.
Any other questions for Kaitlin? Well, Kaitlin, thank you so much. This has been great.
Sorry about the internet connection.
we all have our issues, and that's perfect. And thank you everyone for kind of the like the chat. There was a lot of little kind of how to teach the kids, either kind of send them to a camp. There's a couple links in there. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes if you have additional questions. I do appreciate it though. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank y'all.